We launched Nomina Nuda in July 2018. That was when the first program started. The planning phase took only 2 months, and that included looking for an apartment. I just got back from Dumaguete, and then after a year, I went back to Los Baños. All along, Jael was there teaching humanities at the university. But she was on leave. She was finishing her thesis. So when we got back in Los Baños, um, we kind of realized that we'll be in Los Baños in the long term. I was already based in Los Baños for close to a decade. But it was only then that we realized that, hey, might as well think of something that would make our stay more productive, more fun, um, more engaged with the friends, the people, the community, and at the same time, we were also looking for a place to live in, and things just kind of fell into place, and then we found this 1950s two-story apartment. It was roomy enough. The architecture we thought was flexible enough for informal exhibitions, for small workshops, and round tables. The first program consisted of three solo exhibitions. One is text-based. The other is an installation of a video and photographs, and the third one is an app. It's an
Mm.
interactive app. We invited this Greek artist based in Rotterdam, and with Jael's help, she did this close coordination with Agiliki, the Greek artist, and it was Jael who transposed
Mm.
the work from the Netherlands to Los Baños. And then, apart from the three exhibitions, there was also this um, one act play by Vlad Gonzalez. He's an academic and playwright. And then we invited university students to adapt this script. It's a one act play with only two actors. And so the living room doubled as a set. We recreated a hotel room. It was a pretty bold move from the collaborators because the play involved unsimulated sex between two male actors. And it was a very intimate space. We were able to accommodate around 80 guests inside and more watching from through the windows outside. This is from that performance.
Mm.
We initially thought that it might be good to make the most out of the informality and intimacy of of that space as a performance venue, as opposed to the stage or as opposed to a theater. And so we looked for a material, a script that might be able to fit that kind of specificity
Mm.
in terms of space and venue. And the collaborators were so into it and saw the potential. So this is during the performance, and you see how close the audience is to the performance. So it's very voyeuristic, and yeah, like I said, very intimate. The performance was actually a very critical commentary towards the regime. It's actually a piece specifically about the Duterte administration. The name of the initiative Nomina Nuda is a Latin phrase that translates to naked names.
Mm.
Naked names is actually a biological jargon that refers to invalid scientific names. Like, for example, there's this scientific name for a plant or some organism, but there's not enough literature to support the validity of this name. So that is called a nomen nudum. We like to bank on the many senses by which we could make sense of naked names. It's very literary, and at the same time, it's scientifically specific. And we're also alluding to Los Baños as a scientific community. It's a special science city. The Philippine government designates that particular label to Los Baños. It's technically a municipality, not a city, but in terms of its scientific capital, it has that label officially ascribed by the government, primarily um, because of the natural sciences research that has been going
Mm.
on in the town since the American occupation, dating back to the beginning of the 20th century. And on top of that, the town also hosts the International Rice Research Institute, and of course, the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, which is a center for excellence in many fields of biotech and life science research. So we're kind of alluding to that climate also, to that density when it comes to the scientific capital and the literatures and the studies that have been generated in the place. But the drawback is that um, the, the the dominance in the discourse is of course in the sciences, in the empirical positivist realm. And so like when Jel and I were both part of the university, we directly felt the lack of support when it comes to the humanities, when it comes to projects developing the arts and even the social sciences. It's the least priority, precisely one of the gaps that we seek to address.
One of the reasons why we started is because of one of the artists included in the show, Matt, right? He has he wanted to exhibit his works, but then there's no decent space to host it. He attempted to have an exhibition in a restaurant, and then there were thumb marks of customers on the prints and
May
so
mga
on.
sauce na pagkain yung
Yes.
prints.
Because it's a restaurant, and then the photos were just posted around in that space, and then yeah, we were thinking there's no space like that in Los Baños, even if there are events, for example zine events, but then there's no um, decent exhibition space, especially for students as well. Yeah, that's also one of our um, reasons for starting the space.
And there's this very fetishistic initiative by the university administration, which they call Arts and Science Fusion, which retains the sciences as the priority and makes use of the arts as a kind of a way to dilute or make more accessible the sciences. So there's very little regard and attentiveness to the arts per se, and it's just instrumentalized for the benefit of the sciences. That's how they have been conducting the Arts and Science Fusion program. There would be exhibitions in the only gallery at the university, which is really meant to cater to the students and emerging artists in the region. But the priority would go to scientists who can draw, who can paint. Yeah, so the arts always become prosthetic to scientific agents, so to speak. And of course, these gestures shortchange many artists. It shortchanges the arts in several ways, and it's becoming a very recurring and dominant mannerism at the university, and we thought it might be necessary to conduct activities that kind of go against these practices.
background mo?
Walang panlasa ang hala.
Ang hindi ko matanggap kagad dati yung kinokonteksto yung hindi pa natin alam na pandemya. Yung effect ng pandemya. Bilang problema ng emergency na nagtitignan ng state na halimbawa tinatawag na state of exception basis ng extraordinary powers na kapitong gano'n. So yung mga unang ginagawa ng gobyerno ng curfew, nagde-deploy ng military at ng mga police. Parang stressful sa akin dati yung ganung treatment sa supposedly pandemya na hindi ko tinatanggap dati yung diskurso ng pandemya kasi yung diskurso ng pandemya basically naging diskurso ng security. Okay, so for a while then, hindi ko na rin mapigilan na wala akong ginagawa. Hindi ko rin mapigilan na balikan yung dissertation ko. Halimbawa, inedit, nilagay sa research tool at yung gano'n para maging available. Kasi basically isa yun sa mga tinatry kong kumbaga pag-aralan at tutunan kung paano yung lohika ng Estado na vis-a-vis yung idea ng martial law, yung state of exception, yung gano'n, na siyang parang siya ring diskurso ng pandemya. May tinitignan halimbawa yung mga pulis at saka mga military bilang frontliners. Samantalang kapag tinignan mo yung military pulis bilang frontliners, ang immediately ang pasok ng yung training ng pandemya ay para problema ng seguridad, problema ng kung paano i-control yung mga tao. Eventually, nagbukas ng klase na ayaw namin. So, kumbaga parang ang gusto sana namin dati, pag-isipan, yung isang sem na walang klase, sana. Pag-isipan kung paano tutugunan yung pagkakaroon ng klase na akma sa sitwasyon. Kaso pinilit talagang may klase, so nagka-problema. Hindi rin mabuo yung mga hindi kung kalahati lang ng syllabus yung na-discuss namin. Ganun. Tapos tumatagsa rin yung ibang mga problema pa rin ng emergency, bagyo, itong gano'n, ibang pagsasalanta na hindi ang tugon pa rin ng gobyerno lagi nasa diskurso ng seguridad. Ang last na ginawa ko recently is balikan ulit yung ginawa kong libro or finormat na parang libro para i-submit sa for publication patungkol sa politika, patungkol sa usapin ng Estado, patungkol sa usapin ng pagtingin ng Estado sa pandemya, right? At is-equate siya sa usapin ng ano ba kasi yung lohika ng Estado, right? Na para sa akin, ang lohika ng Estado ay laging martial law na state exception o normalize na aside from sa ganon, stress lang. Hindi nabawi sa actually, para sa akin kasi yung exercise pag-iisip din. So, nagbibisikleta, tumatakbo. Para sa akin yung physicality ng exercise ay conducive para sa pag-iisip din.
Ako panigurado, hindi nabuwasan ng potency yung art. Depende lang sa gagawa ko. Tamad talaga ako gumawa nung para na survival mode lahat. Tapos tiyatansya yung mga mangyayari. Saka parang nagkaroon ka rin ng time para sa sarili mo Parang sige, tama na muna tong art. Time para mag-reflect kung nasan ka sa career, nasan ka sa buhay, gano'n. Tapos at the same time, dahil nakasama ko yung pamilya ko, mas nakilala ko sila, mas nakilala ko rin sarili ko. So medyo nalimutan ko talaga yung art. Ang nagpaalala lang sa akin nung nagkaroon na ng mga fundraisers for mga frontliners, gano'n. Doon ako parang hindi ko nakakalabas dahil mostly ang proseso ko hindi ko lumabas eh, bago ako magpinta eh. So, hindi ko masyadong magawa. Kaya siguro na ano rin, na-stop din ako. Pero ngayon, eto, umpisa ng lockdown, hindi naman ako. Tapos ngayon, nasa LB. So, ang laki ng pagbabago. Nilipat ko yung studio ko dito. Tuwing umagang nakikita ko yung, yung mga unfinished paintings ko dun sa garahe. Parang na-excite naman ako dahil bago yung paligid. Parang malaking bagay din yung change of scenery sa Kasipagan.
Yung iniisip namin ang time na yun, parang, oh shit, magkakaroon ng martial law ulit. So, yung attitude namin towards creating stuff is, parang, ito yung pagkakataon para gumawa ng message na pag-aware. At saka, mas nanaig siya nung lockdown is, parang siyang, parang mas nakita ko siya na mas kailangan siya sa panahon na to. Tapos pwede siyang maging lens kung paano titignan yung mga bagay-bagay. Magkaroon ng perspective.
Adjustment sa art making.
Sa art making. At sa position mo bilang artist.
Napakarami. Hindi ko nga maproseso eh. Kaya nga medyo takot ako gumawa ngayon na parang kung gagawa ngayon ako, ano yung bago. Parang mas doon ako namulat. Kasi dati, tanggapin natin parang naging trabaho ko talaga yung pagiging artist eh. Pero ngayon, diba, parang ayaw mo na ituring siya na gagawa ka lang po. Pero, syempre, welcome challenge. Diba, alam ang baduy din gumawa ng madali. Diba?
Totoo.
Mas nakita ko na sobrang konektado lahat na nangyayari sa mundo. Sa nangyayari sa sarili. At saka kung paano tayo pamililos. Basta, in short, walang isolate.
Walang hiwalay.
Parang may impetus naman gumawa kasi ang dami mong time bigla. Tapos parang feeling mo hawak mo lahat ng oras. Tapos parang nakaka-pressure na gumawa ng something. Ngayon parang biglang nasa iyo lahat ng oras mo. And then nung nagsimula na akong parang warm up to, for example, like mag-drawing ulit or mag-participate sa mga, alam mo yung mga sa Instagram. Tapos parang naisip ko, parang para sa akin. Kasi di ba yun din yung time na parang naiganyo ako sumali din sa mga rally sa Diliman. Para saan yung mga pa-drawing na protest mo? I mean, hindi naman siya nakatulong na gawing parang mas safe yung pakiramdam ko or makalma ako. Parang biglang hindi naging ganun ka-importante yung self-care. Naakala ko before having so much time, super important yung self-care. Tapos nung nakuha ko na siya, parang hindi pa din siya sama. Parang hanggang dun lang yan.
Nakainganyo yung first part niya. Pero ma-realize mo later on na masaya lang siya kung bakasyon siya. Kasi ang notion mo ng normal, ng pagbalik sa normal, ay yung drag ng 8 to 5 na work hours. Pero kapag unti-unti mong na-realize na it's never gonna go back to pre-COVID, yung pinaka-mas masahol para sa akin ay talagang kinuha ng opportunity ng mga gobyerno around the world para isaksak yung mga gusto nilang isaksak sa everyday life. Kasi ginamit siya to normalize everything. Yun yung ma-realize mo na kailangan mo mag-reposition. Mas nag-geared kami towards more quote-unquote, for lack of a better term, utilitarian or functional na works.
So, information.
Yes. Information dissemination, research-based works. Hindi naman sa ayaw mo na dun sa art that making art that keeps you sane kasi meron siya talagang personal function. Bukod doon, parang documentation ng kung paano yung buhay ngayon. Pero parang siguro mas iniisip ko lang yung mga tangible na bagay na kasi ang lapit ng mortality masyado, pareho kami ni Pauline pumunta doon. Yung return doon sa mas haptic na form, yun nga, parang yung matawag
At mas intimate.
halaman, pagtatahil, etc. Isa sa mga pinag-isipan ko din siguro ay yung paano yung pag-produce as a group, as a collective. Valid na maparalyze ka kasi hindi mo alam kung ano yung gagawin. Mawalan ka ng motivation kasi nga naman response siya dun sa para saan. Pero siguro eventually, ako ang effect niya sa akin ay mas maghanap ng ibang paraan. Sa mga sinusundan kong idea, simula nung lockdown ay kung paano much of it has to do with how we're nostalgic about the normal pre-COVID. Sobrang laki ng potential niya ngayon kasi ang dami mong pwedeng pag-isipan ngayon. Pero at the same time, grabe yung limitation na yung pagod mo sa work from home, yung mga ganung bagay. Para ang pinaka-convenient na gustuhin mo ay bumalik sa nung ina-exploit ka pa ng 8 to 5 sa trabaho, etc. Ganito na din naman yung political situation.
Yun, alam mo na matatapos yung oras mo. Alam mo ano yung obligado ka lang na magtrabaho.
Yung feeling ko, isa sa mga pinakamalaking problema, kunwari, sa literary or art production, parang ang tendency lagi ay magsusolicit ka ng submissions, tapos parang in the time of the pandemic. Na para sa akin, di naman ultimately masama. Kasi nga, may iba naman siya, may CV siya, kaso lang, na-reduce yung lahat ng kasamaan na nangyayari
into that theme.
Sa biological na development. Tapos, nawalan yung institutional accountability.
Parang nakakapanlit lang.
Nakaka-trivialize ng ang inconsequential lang bigla.
Ano naman kung kunwari mawala ako at wala akong naiwan or wala akong nagawa, wala akong nasabi. Ganun pa rin naman yun. Hindi naman matatapos yung pandemic.
And would you say na more or less crucial itong nangyari towards realizing these things?
Oo, kasi kung hindi parang ipuput off mo siya ng ipuput off, may time ka forever na gawin ang lahat ng ito. Kapag mas free ka na, kapag mas may oras ka na, kapag mas matalino ka na, kapag mas capable ka na. Tapos ngayon biglang wala ka ng future bigla. And at the same time, wala ka na rin present. So, kung hindi mo siya gagawin, may chance na hindi mo na siya magagawa ulit. Tapos di ko pa rin alam kung ano gagawin ka about that.
Walang magiging processing. Ganun yung dating sa akin. May overwhelming sense na kaya yung parang pakiramdam mo inconsequential ka. Kasi parang pakiramdam mo excessive lang talaga yung production. Wala siya kunwari na immediate na function, pero yung function niya ay yung may byproduct lang yung existence mo.
Pero parang kailangan mo pala yung
kasi kailangan mo humabol, madaan yung oras
may tinatry kami doon for the basement.
Okay.
Right now. But,
the ferment
is matagal-tagal. Nagigilty ako minsan na parang, what if may kailangan sila, mas may kailangan sila. What if may COVID yung kapitbahay niya, yung tatay niya, kailangan niya maghanap ng trabaho kasi nawala siya ng trabaho.
Kasi nga feeling ko parang automatic na sense ng malay na artist ay mag-respond. Pero yung lacking doon lagi ay paano yung app na response? Namin sa the basement. Yun yung susubukan na gawin na parang hindi siya tungkol sa coronavirus. Hindi siya tungkol sa pandemic. Kailangan natin pag-isipan kung ano yung meron, kung ano talaga yung nangyayari. Mas malawak at saka mas yung susubukan niya tignan yung ecology.
Syempre of course, when you think about COVID or the pandemic as a phenomenon. Parang you have this, like, I guess, grand narrative of suffering, right? And this suffering is true, it's real. We see it a lot. But I'm also interested, parang, with my practice, the extent to which that's not even really the case. Parang I'm interested in those moments when, after you wake up and then you go through your morning routines, what's the next thing you do? Parang for me, the COVID narrative is really more minute disturbances or delays in the privileged life, right? Um, and like, I didn't suffer, and that's the reality with which I view the pandemic. And then, of course, you ask yourself what you can do, and then you try your best, right? Like, you try to share relevant information in social media, or when there are people that need help, you donate, you do that. But with regard to the practice and stagnation, I didn't really. I guess it's also because parang the practice itself also evolved in such a way that um, the ideal case is there's no separation between living and making. That's why parang when I feel like I make work, it's not really parang what I feel isn't so much exertion. And that's the so I guess that's why I didn't really I didn't find it to be like a discouraging time, honestly. Actually, kanina binabasa ko yung Bards niya, parang, and parang, di ba, he wrote this diary after his mom died, and he was trying to describe mourning, and he said his experience of mourning wasn't this oppressive jamming, but a kind of like availability. Parang for me, that's the parang how I experienced the pandemic. It's kind of like you're now in this space that of like a radical freedom, right? Parang before you can make excuses about what you can't not do, but now it's proven maybe you can do it, through Zoom. And now you don't have an excuse not to do it anymore. But all these things, parang I think the since a lot of your freedoms are curtailed, parang that that movement of having fewer options makes the algorithmic function of those options fewer. And now instead of having 1,000 choices, you can now only choose from 5, and then you think about what you can do with the 5. Yeah, I guess also with regard to that, but I think I always trying to think about it as, what is objectively the right way forward. So, for example, is what is the right way forward to pause and to rest or to make work? I feel like what is objectively the right thing to do is not stop. So even if I want to stop, the challenge is to how to kind of like reframe my brain to convince myself that you shouldn't stop, or parang to stop is actually the oppressive thing, right? So what is the more significant act of resistance, I guess, to what's going on? And that's why, of course, it's always so much easier to be lazy, to blame, the everything, but then what's also more fun? Where do you derive joy? Right? Is it to not work or to work? For me, it's working, because my practice is about stuff I like. So, whenever for everything I do on a daily basis, it's all part of it, and then that way of working for me is generative. You know, even with a pandemic going on, yeah.
Interesting enough, yung experience ko sa pandemic, we freaked out kasi parang this is the first time it's happening to everyone.
Nasa LB kayo nun?
No, we were in LB. Tapos we got, parang, so we stayed for months and months sa property. And then, after that, parang, alam mo yun, parang natakot kami eh. Parang, of course, parang di mo alam kung anong gagawin mo. So parang lahat, we've hold everything what we have in the house. Until like, so we ration our food, ganyan. Mental-wise, parang you went to a point na parang parang survival mode. Na parang, and it was interesting kasi parang you're stuck with your family at the time. So parang, syempre you haven't done that for a long time being an adult. So parang iba rin yung dynamic nung parang you have to adjust to everything. Tapos in terms of like my, parang yung personal practice ko, like I struggled a bit. Pero, you don't have any choice eh. Kasi you're there, like, I'm so glad I'm not alone. I was with my wife and my family. Pero, of course, yung personal, lumalabas lahat eh. Kasi eventually, parang na-realize mo na parang you have all this time and, luxury of, na wala kang, you don't need to go anywhere. Then, I got to focus, explore yung practice ko and now, parang I've managed to push it further in a sense. And it was interesting kasi nung time na yon I was messaging my best friend Brian Villamael and I told him na parang hirap rin siya eh kasi kakalipat niya lang sa LB tas pandemic. And parang we're both like na parang naluloka na kami. Tapos parang we promise each other na let's try to produce a work on one day. Whether we're tinatamad or we don't feel like it. And then we kept doing that for months and months and months. And yeah, and then we started like experimenting on different materials again, revisiting old practices. And then, yeah, okay naman yung outcome. Like, ang laki ng difference niya if you spend like 4 months, 5 months, like in physical confinement in your own space. You have to like, parang yung at that stage parang it's either you're gonna make it or break it eh. Tapos parang at that point parang I realized a lot of things in my own personal life na parang what I need to change and to figure things out and work through. Sobrang therapeutic ang art making eh. It's like for me and Jess, parang it was the only way for us to escape this kind of reality that everyone is facing. And I'm sure like not everyone in the whole pandemic situation didn't experience that. Kami ni Jess parang yun yung yeah.
And
It
of
was.
course,
We could actually like sit down in the studio and make something. Focus.
No,
Yeah.
and spend time without practice because
No.
usually just make and send it off. You
Yeah.
don't get to like
Yeah.
live with it, marinate
Yeah.
it.
Especially like yung system here in Philippines na parang sobrang fast-paced yung art scene eh. It's like flavors of the month or whatever.
Tiangge, no?
Tiangge,
Divisory.
yeah. It's art market.
Commercially based, it's like
Iba rin talaga pag ganyan eh. Kasi like for example, sa amin, multimedia, yung ginagawa namin mga piyesa kasi is, kailangan ka pumunta eh. Like for example, short documentary sa multimedia. Like before pandemic, nakakagawa kami ng 10, 15 short docus. Doon sa mga communities na affected ng mga kumbaga, tawag dito, development aggressions, militarization at kung ano pa mga issue sa lipunan. So, sa amin, sa multimedia, talagang, kumbaga, kabaliktaran ng sa inyo sa arts na talagang nakakapag-focus kayo sa ginagawa. Sa amin, medyo naging challenging talaga eh kasi hindi ka makagalaw eh. Pag labas mo, kailangan may QR code ka, kailangan meron kang pass, kailangan. Tapos restrict pa kami. Yung ang inilabas ng IATF noon, kailangan may ID para ka makapag-cover ng kung ano mga events na nangyari. Kung wala kang ID, huhulihin ka eh. So yun, sa amin, sa naging process namin, natutunan din namin kung paano i-maximize yung online meetings, pasahan ng mga data, ng mga files, para yung ibang nandun sa community, through technology, namin, kuha kayong video, pasa nyo sa amin, kami mag-edit, kaming gagawa ng piyesta. As much as we want to go to the, to the location, nandun pa rin yung kumbaga fear na mahulihin ka dahil wala kang appropriate na documents, wala kang COVID results na magko-cross ka through boundaries ng mga provinces. Dalawa na yung fear. It's either you mahawa ka at pag-imit ang authority. So kung dati ang kinakaharap ng mga multimedia artists sa amin na nagdo-document ng mga ganitong mga bagay is yung harassment from people in power, ngayon dalawa na. Iba rin yung ginawa talaga ng pandemic. For example, ngayon nag-settle na lang kami sa mga online conversations, pasahan ng files. Well, at least ngayon, ang advantage niyan, na-compel namin yung mga partner communities namin na matuto mag-document.
Thinking about like how do we mobilize? I'm not a political person, but it's like shit is not right, and how do we try to make it right? How do we do something about it in our own way? We have the time to reflect on what our daily habits and our how we live and how that affects everyone else, even like small things like a relationship with, our art practice and our gallery, and then ourselves and our community. And it's interesting.
And time is evolving after the pandemic. Because now, like having internet as your main weapon, as being creative, has been more, like yung movement of that is so different now.
Alam naman natin yung shit nung pandemic talaga, ang dami niyang ginawa sa atin na shit. Pero yung mga opportunities na binigay sa atin ng pandemic bilang artist ay una binigyan niya tayo ng panahon para mag-focus dun sa mga sarili nating space kasi hindi nga tayo makalabas. Tapos nagkaroon tayo ng pagkakataon para gumawa, tapos mag-introspect, ganyan. Tapos parang napaka-healthy talaga nun sa mga artists. Tapos yung pangalawa ay binigay din ng pandemic yung pagkakataon na makita natin kung ano yung sitwasyon talaga na kung anong meron yung Pilipinas ngayon sa usapin ng health crisis, yung mga EJK, parang sobrang itong pandemic na to, napaka-obvious nun na tambad sa atin yung mga usapin na yun. Tapos parang bilang mga artist, parang binigay sa atin ng pandemic na yun yung pagkakataon kung paano natin to i-interpret or i-digest. Parang kung binigyan niya tayo ng pagkakataon na kung ano ba yung magiging papel ng mga artist sa ganitong panahon na to. So, tingin ko magandang bagay yun. I mean, syempre, pangit talaga yung pandemic. Shit talaga. Pero kasi parang na-advance nung pandemic yung usapin sa kung ano talaga yung role ng mga artist sa mga gantong panahon. Sa usapin ng rasismo, ayun, sa EJK, ganyan. So, kumbaga, meron tayong pagkakataon na gumawa, pero meron din tayong pagkakataon na questionin kung para saan ba tayo gumagawa, para kanino. yun yung mga realizations ko. Tapos parang yun yung mga struggle. Tsaka walang pera. Ang hirap ng pera. Bili na kayo ng paintings ko.
Ang ganda.
So, ilang araw pa lang ata after my show, simula yung lockdown. So, yung show na trinabaho ko ng ilang buwan, short siya. Pero parang nung start kasi ng pandemic, na-depress ako. Like, for 2 months, being honest lang, like hindi talaga ako nagtrabaho. For 2 to 3 months, like, ayaw mag-isip, like, wala parang, akala ko kasi 1 week lang yung lockdown, tapos tumagal siya ng tumagal. Tapos nandun ka lang sa bahay. Parang yung stasis lang na you're thinking of what's going to come. Parang something you worked so hard for got cut short. Which I know is so egotistical. But when I was thinking about it, it wasn't even about my show being cut short. It was just the uncertainty of it. Tapos dumating din sa point na syempre parang nagsimula si Gio magtrabaho. Kasi siya talaga fashion eh. Kailangan niya mag-produce. So he started working again. And we share a studio. So when he started working, I started working also. Kasi syempre, na-pressure ako to produce. And then when I started producing new work, yung work ko kasi tungkol siya sa paranoia, surveillance. That we were all on our screens. So parang, for some people, the screen was an avenue to, promote their work. But for me, I get so much anxiety from it. Kaya din hindi ako social media. Kasi nahihirapan ako because I think of all the entanglements. And then, but at the same time, parang a good friend told me na, pag nade-depress ka, yung way out naman doon is to think why. Bakit ka nade-depress? What are the
Reflexivity.
conditions that lead you to feel this way? It's not just biological. There's always this aspect na what's around you that's causing you to feel this way. So, once you try to take a grasp of that and I guess channel it, na parang, ang art naman kasi parang sa excuse lang mag-theorize eh. Like, ang galing natin mag-metaphor eh. So, yun lang, parang excuse lang siya sa akin mag-theory for my own sanity. Resback has this new space in Cubao. Tapos, dahil sa pandemic, hindi din namin magamit yung space. I mean, we had an exhibit there. It was a really nice show. Which parang hindi din kami parang hindi namin ma-maximize. I guess it's the same with protests, with mobilizations. Parang ang hirap mag-call for people to be there. Kasi yun nga, parang sinabi nila na dalawa na yung fear mo eh. It's not just the government now. You're also afraid of the virus. Parang some people live with their parents, like we live with his parents. So parang they're at risk sila. So ang hirap lumabas. It's like you're putting the whole household at risk.
The first 3 months, depressed ata tayo.
Depressed.
Pero we tried coping it by not being productive yet, but going back to trying out old and trying out new hobbies. I started playing music a bit again kasi I graduated from a music degree, but I switched to fashion. And then, piano na kami, we just learn new things lang. Addict kami sa anime. Tapos, for the first 3 months, we weren't working or being productive at all because I actually thought na this quarantine wouldn't last, that long. And then eventually when things moved to GCQ, what actually got me back to being productive again was my employees. Kasi during the whole lockdown, walang work. And for them, ipit sila sa, wala silang livelihood eh. So, and then...
Tsaka si Kuya Odi, gusto niya din na tumira sa akin.
Yeah, so,
kasi yung...
nag-stay in na lang yung workers.
Hindi kasi yung, checkpoint. Tawag sila sa checkpoint.
Hassle kasi like, my skilled workers came from Balintawak, they had to go to Pasig. Ang dami daw, dumaan siya mga 5 checkpoints. So, he said, if okay lang, mag-stay in na lang siya. So, which is also a good thing for, as, we get to work and he's there. In terms of our practice, well, the challenging part was since even prior to the lockdown, prior to COVID, it was a new brand. I just launched no November 2019. So things weren't really picking up at that point, and then in the lockdown, so it's hard. I mean, but as creative also gave us a lot of time to rethink and conceptualize the practice, bring more think of it, give more depth to it, and also experiment on new forms and methods of how I work with I do that. I hand dye and I work with natural fabrics and how to treat those. It just developed our, as my identity as a fashion designer. So now, ganun pa rin.
Mm.
I think it's harder for you. Kasi, kunwari, as an artist, ako lang eh. Like, if I wanna work, it's just me. I just have to make myself get out there.
For me kasi
But for him, he
I've
has
worked
people
eh, so and
work with him.
they rely on me.
Walang choice.
Walang choice. I wanna help my workers then have a livelihood. So before
Talaga.
COVID, I never planned to do like online.
Okay.
Sales kasi I wanted the experience of the customer going to the store.
Parang feeling ko, like, in terms of fine art, or whatever fine art is supposed to be, malabong magbago eh. Kasi bago ba yung buyers? Like, ang pinaka-bago kong nakita, it's like, yung news about NFTs. Pero when I was reading articles about this, like, it's not
Same-
so
same
different
mar-
from the
uh,
current art market. Like, it's
Where
just
everyone's so optimistic, di ba? How it empowers.
yung emancipation from the market, you get the percentage every time you make a sale with the NFT. Pero parang at the same time, may nakita kasi yung article na yung pera na pinapambili ng NFT, it's wash terrorist money. Yung
Oh
mga
my
ganon.
God.
So parang ako, you're critiquing NFTs in this way, but when will you critique the actual fine art market in this way? It's just very the same. Same but different.
Nagpalit lang ng currency.
Oo, nagpalit lang ng method of transaction, I guess. Same but different. Pero maybe I'm super jaded.
Actually, sa totoo lang, nung buong pandemic, medyo wala kasi ako. Sumuli ako sa provision. Hindi masyadong nakapag-practice. Pero yung ginagawa ko, mas more on kamukha ng influencers. Tapos parang nakikita ko lang na siguro kung i-relate ko lang din sa sinabi ni Sid na kung papaano nagbabago yung pagtingin natin sa mga bagay, yung ibinigay nun sa atin ng pandemic. Kasi di ba sinasabi natin na kung papaano yung mga crafts na ginagawa natin, reflection siya ng kung paano natin tinitingnan yung mga bagay. So basically, parang kung sinasabi natin, kung yung time na to ng pandemic ay bigay sa atin para magbago yung mga pagtingin natin sa mga bagay. So, tingin ko yun yung isang bagay na naging effect ng pandemic na parang ma-challenge yung mga artist na mas ma-push pa kung ano yung mga bagay na gusto nilang gawin. Hindi lang yun, sa sake na makagawa pa ng mga bagay na dati nilang ginagawa. Kasi yung isa rin na yun, with all the things going on sa atin siguro, sa usapin din ng political, diba? So, yun talaga doble-doble rin yung mga factors na tingin ko, yung panahon na to mas growth para sa mga artist. Then, kung paano din mas magde-develop or mag-a-advance yung mga dating practices na mga nagawa.
Vlog.
Kumusta yung ano?
Visit Pong Restaurant in Los Baños.
Something na.
Oo. Kanina pa, girl.
Pakita mo yung payong. Meron siyang handmaiden. Meron siyang handmaiden.
Jael and Christian, just generally do not trust them. Flat out. There is some form of artistic paralysis, and not just in the sense that I am unable to churn out creative work. There's also a conscious attempt not to, because I feel like with all the terrible things that are going on in the world, there's nothing that art, or in my case, poetry, there's nothing that poetry can do, no matter how beautifully written, that can disrupt the systemic inequalities that have excluded so many people from material survival. And so when people write poetry, at least with the whole connotation of poetry being this thing that um, that that's transformative, with something that has so much revolutionary potential, and knowing the inability of poetry to affect people's material conditions, then there's also this whole internal conflict about the pursuit for arts. And so no matter how much I write about the people who are dying, the fact that they don't have access to that particular work, not just in terms of it being available to them, materially available to them, but also the fact that it is poetry. Therefore, there's a certain elevation and elitism to the craft that's inaccessible language-wise. Kind of makes it terrible.
In relation to what you deem as an intrinsic na elitism to art. Pero open ka din sa idea na while we know the limits na hanggang dito na talaga art kahit gaano mo pa siya i-radicalize, di ba? Hindi siya, it might not be able to save lives or better the world, etc. etc. Wala tayong ganun delusion. Nare-retool siya.
I suppose, pero that's gonna take a while and that's gonna take a lot of work. So parang for now, my resolve is more anchored on how we tend to, yes, we do tend to overvalorize what art can do, but ano din, parang we tend to overvalorize it as though art is meant to change the world, but we also tend to ascribe overburden it with the responsibility of indeed saving the world when in fact it can't. So I guess, to be fair, I feel like with all, because there's also this whole context we're living in, there's so many things going on every day, so I can't really foresee myself past 2 weeks from now. So
Day by day lang talaga.
I suppose whatever plans I have of being able to practice my art again in the future, in a post-pandemic world, is still abstract and sort of floating in the air. So right now, I'm just gonna take it day by day. And if it does come back, then good. But I hope that by then, I have a more, I suppose, a more sober understanding of what art in fact can do. And sometimes it's just a beautiful thing. It's just there to beautify the world. And maybe that's okay.
Belated happy birthday, Pam!
Siguro ngayon na-appreciate ko sa pandemic yung pagbabike. Na-enjoy yung pagiging solitary sa biking. Tapos yun din, made me think of, yun, kung ano yung mga pwedeng gawin sa pandemic. Yung mga limitations din, doon mo din ma-acknowledge. Kung maraming mga tao yung nagbabike na marami sila, ako kasi gusto ko ng solo, parang yun yung time of reflection. Kasi, yeah, you can't really afford to be alone anywhere else but at home. Unless,
Parang wala naman kasi siya nagbago sa buhay ko. Kasi work from home naman ako ever since. Stay at home / work at home. Work from home. Mom. Actually, paano ba? Mga 4 or 5 years old si Ben, nagkaroon ng time na 3 months straight halos. Once lang ako lumabas ng bahay. For groceries. Siguro kung quarantine lang. May experience na ako. So, hindi siya bago. Pero mas nahihirapan ako mag-adjust siguro na yung people na close to me na mas nahihirapan sila mag-cope. Tapos, usually, nakausapin ako, like, paano ka nakaka-cope. Sabi ko, ito 8 years. Parang dati solitary thing siya yung ginagawa ko na alone.
Tapos bigla ngayon, everyone's alone. Na-experience yun rin na parang medyo naiintindihan niya. At the same time, parang hindi siya talaga normal. Si Kevin, pinipilit niya ako na mag-pursue ulit ng, dati kasi nung bata ako, may ako doon. Tapos nag-stop ako.
Tsaka recently yung illustration for exercise ko yung gumagawa.
Yes.
Tapos si Perry kasi, nag-drawing ako ulit. Gawa ni Perry. Kailangan niya ng hobbies. Nag-drawing kami lagi pa rin. Yeah, nag-ulit.
Minsan may mga prompts sila, ganyan. Mga leaves.
Minsan mga gawa ng laurel.
Dahon ng laurel, mga ganyan yung drawing nila.
Hindi ba magdodrawing si Perry for exercise?
You what?
For daddy's
Ako, ayun yung naging ko siguro, parang creative outlet. Parang tinry ko lang i-launch yung extra rice. Ang naging problema ko lang, na-challenge ako dun sa pag-isip ng articles or ng topics kasi nga dapat nasa bahay ka lang, confined ka lang. Na-challenge ako na gawin siya kasi nga all the more kasi nga mahirap maghanap ng restaurant these days. Ganyan. I guess yun yung naging pet project ko na hindi ko na masundan at kailangan ko sundan. So yun, exercise na natin. Feeling ko yun yung na-unravel ko, na-discover ko sarili ko nitong pandemic. Sobrang dami kong, hindi man insecurities, pero parang masyado akong kinikriticize yung sarili ko. Oo, siguro ngayon, mas madami akong time kasi na magbasa, na magsulat.
At maging obsessive, compulsive about it.
Exactly. Na parang ngayon, mas madami kang time, sobrang daming time in fact, na parang dapat mas maayos yung sulat.
So what's keeping you busy during this time apart from school? And yeah, can you say more about your work?
Yung Python, I make games.
Talaga?
Yeah, I already make like a drawing.
Ano ka?
Yung katong yung sa CS15.
Tangka ni Kevin. Hindi kasi sa frame.
May lecture. Tsaka may CS50 forward ako ng course.
Na libre.
Na libre.
It's for free. You started last April.
Yeah, last April.
You started coding. Ano yung mga languages na natutunan mo?
Python, tsaka Scott.
Yung pinaka-favorite mo dun sa languages? C. Bakit C?
Hindi, C and Python.
Bakit
Oh, why?
Kasi mas challenging.
Ay, pakita mo sa amin, Perry, yung painting mo. Ayun sa keyboard.
Kunin mo.
And then tell us why you decided to paint the volcano.
Because he said that it should be Islangonia inspired, and then I searched in Google, and then I saw a volcano drawing by so I copied it.
But you wanted it to be, somewhere more local, right? Somewhere closer to our experience.
Hindi namin siyang prompt.
How often do you paint and draw?
Like every time I have free time, like after school.
Why do you enjoy doing it?
Because it's fun and because I get to
Recreate stuff. Okay. Like you can do it your way, right?
Yeah. My own style. Gusto ko drawing ng human body at anatomy.
Because?
It's cool to know about our own body. I search images of bacteria and cells, and then I copy it to
What do you find interesting about bacteria?
they keep you alive.
Grabe, hindi mo itong anak ninyo, ha?
Nagulat din ako sa sagot niya. Ganda. Do you want to make a zine? Alam mo ba yung mga zine, di ba? Yung mga parang kay Apple Santa Maria, di ba? Kung may zine ka, if you're going to make your own zine, what would it be about? Human body.
Yun yung fixation niya ngayon. Thank you, Perry. Can we share this? Can we share this to the public? Yay!
Kasama mo naman yung parents mo.
Ayaw mo talaga mag-vlog?
Lumipat kami ng bagong house.
ano siya, apartment siya sa Binyan. Yeah, sobrang laki niya, good for 14 dogs. Kasi yun talaga yung pinaka-goal, makahanap ng bahay for 14 dogs. Nung nandun ako sa bahay, parang madali ko silang bibigyan ng attention tsaka ng pagkain halimbawa. Unlike yung parati kang wala sa bahay. Tapos, for the first time, nakita ko sila na masasaya, na gusto yung, meron kasi silang mange, bumabalik yung balahibo nila ngayon, na parang talaga sila nagtatribe dun sa bagong space. Lahat parang sa bahay nagtatribe. Parang all of a sudden, nagkakabuhay yung bahay. Ganun. Parang, yung mga spaces sa bahay na gusto mong i-take advantage, nagdudwell ka. So, katulad nun, bumili ako ng halaman. Nag-aayos ka ng mga kasangkapan sa bahay para, alam mo yun.
Parang
Yun yung nakokontrol mo. Nag-start kami just last year, around October, gumawa ng podcast. Tapos, ano siya, mga dating members ng Pantas, including me. Tapos, namimili kami ng akda, tapos pinag-usapan namin siya. Iba't ibang klase, like from short story, mga traditional forms ng short story, poetry, tapos pati rin iba, like halimbawa videos, mga short films, tapos rap, pati rap battles. Tapos, ano pa ba?
may comics din.
May comics, yeah. Tapos, this year, ang pinaplano namin parang every month meeting kami. Tapos, this February, last February, ang theme ay dictatorship. So, usually mga creative non-fiction tsaka essays. Yeah, dati pa kasi namin binabalak talaga magbalik sa workshop life, pero never namin yun na-achieve. So ngayon na parang lahat nasa bahay, tas parang lahat may time every Sunday. Eventually lahat parang suddenly gusto nila talaga umattend sa ganun. So hindi lang siya, unlike yung dating traditional workshop na about form or about stylistics, parang more of ano din, parang yung insights na nakuha namin doon and
Tsaka yung milieu, kasalukuyang milieu ay nagsisip in din sa discussions.
Yeah. Tapos like yung nagre-reflect din halimbawa yung mga current issues dun sa text na pinipili. Sa first few months ng pandemic lang talaga. Like, parang lahat ng attention mo nakafocus dun sa survival. Kasi, yun nga, lahat nag-iba. Tapos parang, kahit na gusto mo mag-reflect dun sa time, parang hindi siya, parang hirap kasing magsulat habang nasa storm ka. So parang, lahat, steady lang. Parang, nung medyo tumagal-tagal na, yun, dun na nag-start na parang, na-recognize yung need din talaga for expression. Pero at the same time, hindi pa rin makabuo. Kaya parang yung discussions, nakakatulong siya kasi parang it keeps you parang grounded. Tsaka parang, parang,
For me, parang siyang nagpapaalala na there's more than trying to survive and work.
Parang hindi ka pa rin talaga totally hiwalay. So parang, yun, pag may mga ganung discussions, kailangan talaga siya para siya support group, gano'n. na kailangan mo siya para hindi ka makalimot, ganyan, sa craziness na nangyayari.
Nag-organize kami pa din ng online film festival. Kahit nung start ng pandemic, like sobrang ayaw na namin siyang ituloy kasi parang in terms of viewership, nag-worry kami na konti lang yung manonood or yung may access lang sa internet yung makakanood. Pero we still made it, we still decided to pursue it kasi one part of the festival was to like magkaroon ng parang mga like what do you call this? FGDs with filmmakers and for them to share their status during the pandemic, kung paano sila nagko-cope. Tapos pati din yung status ng regional filmmaking sa Calabarzon during the pandemic. So given na may ganung pangangailangan para i-assess kung ano yung nangyayari sa mga filmmakers at mga film workers during that time, pinush na lang namin siya. Although medyo ang napansin lang namin, like for example, since 10th year na din nung film festival that we're managing, like sobrang konti talaga nung naging viewership. So medyo nalungkot kami. Pero we made it a point naman na lahat nung like FGDs, lahat nung like webinars ay in-upload namin just to make sure na nabahagi naman namin kung ano yung naging status na shinare sa amin ng mga film workers both from Mindanao, Visayas, and Luzon kasi we made it a point. Hindi lang Calabarzon yung nahinga namin ng kwento kung ano yung naging ganap nila during the pandemic. That was last October. It was a month-long na online film festival.
Kasi parang before the pandemic started, medyo with my practice, parang hindi ko din siya masyadong ginagawa kasi pinag-iisipan ko siya. So nung time na parang almost a year na hindi ako masyadong gumagawa kasi I'm just thinking about it. And then, nung nag-start yung pandemic, parang continuation lang siya nung ginagawa ko before that. Mostly, wala lang, trying to understand what's going on around me pa din. Tapos, in terms of my practice or anong gusto kong gawin, parang hindi naman siya nagbago. Parang same pa din yung kasi personally what I feel is parang lahat ng generations naka-experience naman siguro ng something like this. It's not something new. It's more of mas aware na yung mga tao. Parang just thinking about life in general, I think. And yung parang in the beginning kasi medyo sobrang abrupt siya bigla yung hindi ka nakakalabas whatsoever. So parang nagkaroon din ako ng cabin fever, I think. What you're experiencing now is it's gonna be here for a while. Siguro even like 5 years or like it's really gonna be around. It's not gonna go away. I think. Nagbago siya big time with my personal life. Like hindi yung I'm not thinking about work or kasi in terms of work or like creating something, I feel like I guess like I'll consider it na like a privilege that I could do it. I have that time and I don't have to worry about when I'm gonna do it because I know I always have that time. Hindi na din kasi ako nag-rely on my practice for money. Privileged din ako na like I was able to save a little bit before it happened. Kasi yung year na I was just like thinking about my practice, what I wanna do, what I wanna change, or what I'm gonna make soon. Basta hindi siya nagbago for me at all. May mga inconveniences, syempre. Pero I don't know, like now when I think about it, it's not a big deal anymore. Para siyang protocol na lang talaga. Pero of course, meron, like I'm still super disturbed sa like parang 1 year na wala pa rin nangyayari or like it could have been prevented. Hindi prioritize yung mga taong to na dapat sila naman yung mga pina-prioritize. Parang mga ganun. Sobrang in the beginning dahil lagi akong nasa bahay lang and then always internet. At one point medyo I consume too much. I consume so much information also na parang sobrang nakakagalit siya. Na parang tas napansin ko parang I was like that for a while tas parang tinigilan ko siya kasi nakakapagod. So parang I consciously disconnected myself from that for a while so I could like I don't know, step back and see it like as a bigger picture.
And how do you think these experiences will affect yun nga, yung trajectory ng magiging practice mo or yun nga, nung works mo?
Kasi it started really as ano ba? It's not supposed to be work. It's supposed to be something you just do, something you're very passionate about. Parang it's not practical, but it's always gonna be, it's always gonna be there. Parang ganun siya. Like photography for me is like that. Parang hindi siya necessity. But at the same time, it helps so many people in different ways. Like siguro, I don't know, mentally, like when you're exploring or like it's like something like a kid would see tapos biglang like there's so much to this world or there's so much you can do with just like letting your mind okay, I feel good na I'm happy na
pwede ka pa din siyang gawin somehow. Despite like everything that's going on.
Parang realize ko kasi parang after college, parang yung school ay parang pinatry lang sa'yo lahat ng things you can try. Tapos eventually pag-graduate mo, you do whatever you want to do. Tapos parang tapos sinabay pa niya yung pandemya na parang everyone's at home, tapos ikaw kaka-graduate mo sa college na parang yung nagkukulong sa'yo para gumawa ng something na gusto mo. Nakalabas ka, free ka, tapos nasa loob ka lang naman ng bahay, parang gano'n. Tapos, dahil doon, parang may kahirapan na mag-isip ng direksyon dahil kakatapos lang, tapos kinukulong ka naman ngayon. Parang inisip ko na lang na parang kakaibang type of freedom yung naramdaman ko. Na parang ang daming layers. Dahil sa dami nga din ng aral mo, parang you just very spontaneous with what comes to you. Na parang, parang yung practice mo, depende kung sino yung kaharap mo kasi may need ka din. Dahil pandemya, it's really hard to get things at kumita ng pera. Tapos parang ganun. So parang, at yung mga tao din lumalapit sa'yo, very intimate kasi friends mo lang din sila and asking for help. Parang dahil doon, dahan-dahan ka pang nag-explore from college. Parang ganito yung practice na talaga when it comes to outside world. And dahil dun sa pagiging domestic ng everything, parang nag-explore ako sa mga bagay na parang una, mahal yung canvas. If I'm a painter, mahal yung canvas, mahal yung everything. So, I go for something that is smaller. Nag-try ako mag-explore ng iba't ibang mga bagay, ng mga maliliit lang na bagay. Tapos pinag-mix ko siya like sculpting, tapos I'm doing also photography, and then meron ding printing and all that. Tapos gusto ko siyang magsama-sama. Nag-weave din ako. So siya magsama-sama into one thing. This time kasi di ba time of uncertainty. So parang yung goal setting can be very blur. Parang ganun. No? Parang kahit mag-goal set ka dyan, parang it doesn't go the way you want it to be talaga dahil dahil pandemya, ganun. Pero siguro if ever napatapos nga, so parang siguro parang parang feeling ko along the way, you're putting stones na parang isa siyang malaking pond na nalalagay ka ng mga stones, tapos hindi ka gumagawa ng path. Parang nilalagay mo lang siya doon. So if you really want to go back there, there's still stones that you can step on and go back to the path that you want to go. Parang ganun.
Anong nangyari kasi nung lockdown, parang naging mag-isa ako sa bahay, umuwi ng probinsya ng tao. Tapos yung naging interesting sa akin doon, parang biglang naging probinsya yung buong Manila, yung tahimik niya. Tapos na-enjoy ko yun. Yung at siguro medyo calm yung naging effect, calm yung effect sa akin while all of this shit is going on habang papasa ako dito. Tapos in relation to my photography work, siyempre parang wala kasi as documentary photographer. Kaya yung ginagawa ko kasi mostly shooting events or like gallery shows or mga casual ban o kaya hang out with like these different artists. I take like casual like skateboard and stuff. So nawala yun kasi walang hirap. Tapos siguro medyo sakto lang din yung timing na yung na-build yung body of work na parang hindi ko pa na-edit or anything for the past 5 years. Parang sakto lang na okay. Medyo before pandemic, medyo nagsuslow down na ako sa paggawa niya. Sakto lang na ito na nasabi sa sarili ko na ito na yung time na okay, baka pwede ko na ayusin yung baka pwede ko na i-sit down tapos i-edit. Pero hindi ko rin siya nagawa. Kasi na-absorb lang din ako siguro nung sobra din sa nangyayari. Na inaantay ko na lang na medyo medyo siguro na sobrang ako sa pag-asa na maybe somehow public at least sa mga events. Hindi siya magsaspan ng isang year. Pero even if like I know rationally na parang yung inevitable na yan, right? Na medyo matagal siya parang 2 2 years, 3 years pa before everything actually gets back to a semblance of normalcy. Ang nangyari, ang naging release ko na lang siguro that time was exploring different uh, uh, na different practices like na separate sa what I mainly do like photography. Hindi, imbes na mag-shoot or mag-edit, parang nag-dabble ako with experimental with music and electronics. So mga, yun. So parang nag-focus ako sa ibang thing, yung new stuff while I was isolated at home. Habang tumagal na siya, hindi naisip ko. Eventually parang nag-decide na ako, okay, kailangan mag-adapt sa situation. Parang walang mangyayari kung parang, ano na yun, asa na lang ako sa wala. Hindi ko alam kung maging effective kung mag-react ako sa nangyayari. I guess ang pinaka naging reaction ko na lang was yung political turmoil na nangyayari, yung mga ganun kalokohan. Doon ako mas nag-react. Pero hindi ako nag-react in a way to make, kaya mag-react ako dito para kung ano
Something.
na, hindi na nangyari. But eventually, yun, nag-adapt na rin ako. Tapos slowly, sinisimulan ko na ulit yung like, after a year since the lockdown. Kaya gusto ko i-hone yung mga bagong skills na require. But at the same time, hindi, more of a release lang siya. Hindi siya, hindi naman siya parang biglang career change or medium message. Hindi naman parang gano'n. So, ngayon, ang naging swerte lang din ako na nagkaroon ako ng opportunity to do like archiving work, which is also the type, yung ginawa ko rin work professionally before from other institutions. And, so, swerte ako na nagkaroon ako ng ganun opportunities. Doon ako nag-focus sa work na yun, which is sa tingin ko, naging helpful din sa akin. In parallel to my own personal stuff, yung archiving na process na yun, nami-mirror din sa gusto kong gawin sa sarili kong work. Nag-archive ako ng iba-ibang artworks. Nag-digitize with Green Papaya. But at the same time, parang nakikita ko yung since I'm doing that already, I might as well do it with my own stuff, with my own work. Para lulusin.
Ayun, siguro yun yung pinaka-recent na line of light, yung term na nakuha ko sa curatorial workshop. Nung time na yun, ang pinagmumuni-munihan ko the whole lecture, kung may pitfalls, ano yung opposite niya. Tapos nung time na yun, ang napag-usapan namin ng friend ay si Tina Basco, peak flight. Tapos hindi ko alam at the time, meron palang entire theory at philosophy na lines of light. So, siguro ngayong pandemic, ang naging line of light ko ay curatorial work. Tapos, ang nakikita ko sa kanya parang intersection ng sobrang daming interest at passions na posibleng hopefully magkaroon ng way para magkaroon ng effect. Siguro ngayong pandemic, andun yung awareness na ito yung mga nangyayari, realities ng economics na wala tayong mga trabaho, ganyan. So, paano ka hindi malulugmok na sa depression ng times? Tapos ito pa yung sa Southern Tagalog, dito sa atin, sunod-sunod ng mga rental, kasi patay. Tapos yung napansin ko rin kasi sa advocacy work, malaking aspect yung consciousness raising. Pero ang nakikita ko lagi, pag masyado nakapokus sa consciousness raising, tapos walang part na, yun nga yung term na line of light, parang series of yung malulugmok sa depression. Tapos kapag na-depressed sila at hindi na sila functional, hanap na naman ng bagong tao yung movement, mga fresh, young, ganyan. So, ang dami ko nakita na people of my age or older na, once upon a time, activist sila. And then they're not anymore. Kasi parang, it's too much, it's too painful, and wala namang nangyayari. Yun. So, parang, sa akin, parang yung sustainability, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, ay hanapin na yung line of life. And it so happens na kita ko siya naaninap ko siya nung pandemic, nung may COVID ako. So, nung nagka-pandemic naman, nagka-COVID ako, wala rin choice kundi mag-rest.
Tapos yung lapse din sa rest ang dahilan kaya tingin mo ano yung immune system mo? Nag-accommodate ng virus?
Tsaka hindi na yung lapse ng rest, yung despair sa state ng mundo. Nakita ko kasi noon kung ano yung nangyayari sa loob ng mga hospital. Yun nga yung tinatry ko na ma-admit yung staff namin na nagka-COVID. Tapos sa tawag sa hospital the whole day, iba-ibang hospital, tapos walang bakante. Ang hinihintay mong slot ay
Sa mga
may mamatay. Tapos kapag may namatay, din may ng spot din sa bed. 21 a.m.
Okay.
First time ko siya narinig.
Ay, kay Deluz.
Kay Deluz, kay Marian Pastorose. So, tapos ako kasi parang ang term ko na, okay, anong peak flight ko? Yun yung personal term ko na, okay, sumasadsad ako dito. Ito yung mga issues na sasadsad ako ng a month, 2 months, ganyan. So, kailangan may antidote ako na, okay, may namatay na naman na lumad sa community na pinagalingan mo, pinuntahan mo, kakilala mo. Okay, aware ka na dyan, anong pwede mong gawin? Kasi debilitating din yung ganong grief eh. So, paano magiging sustainable energetically na hindi nakakagalaw. So, hinanap ko lagi yung peak flight. Yung hinanap ko pang peak flight, mga ganito na, okay, pusa, peak flight. Ganyan, parang sobrang depressed may pusa ka. Okay, charge, gano'n. Tapos yung line of flight, parang gusto ko sa kanya mas sustainable. Kasi yung peak flight, ano ka lang siya parang power shot lang. Kasi hindi rin siya matagal. So, kailangan ko ng maraming gano'n. So, marami akong pusa. Sobrang dami. Ayan. Tapos, yung lines of light, parang feeling ko visioning siya forward. So yun. Yung sa CCP na concept sa 21 AM, yung excitement ko sa kanya ay, kasi parang hindi ko gusto necessarily pumasok sa CCP. Kasi yung history niya ay sobrang fraught. Ang naisip ko concept na nung time na pinutap yung CCP, pinapatayo siya, si Lucy Lipard naman, dematerialization yung nakikita niyang trend or ang pinipredict niya maging pattern ng art ay mawawala yung object. Tapos sa Philippines, na nangyayari, gusto na merong edifice complex. I think nung hinayaan naman ako maging participant dun sa workshop, parang ako, okay, CCP ko.
Tsaka reflexive sila and critical, no?
Very,
sa legacy.
Sobrang surprising and encouraging, refreshing na sobrang taas ng self-awareness and flexibility nila sa history nila. At saka yung examples. Saka yung sobrang daming examples na over the years, may resistance ng artist working with CCP, within CCP. Mataas yung interest ko dun sa mga works na nandoon at yung archiving. Yun, kung maibubukas siya at nung nalaman ko nga sa workshop na ibubukas siya talaga, hindi lang para sa mga participant, kundi publicly. Sobrang fascinating siya for me kasi democratizing yung art kung ganun. Tapos na meron din siyang platform na yung mga tao pwedeng mag-input din kasi sa workshop. Para yun na kunyari dyan yung entry. Kumbaga yung parang library card nitong artwork na to, kunyari galing sa isang indigenous city. Pwedeng maglagay doon ng, okay, mali, hindi po yan. Galing sa Ipugao, Kalinga po yan. Actually, ito yung ginawa. So, pwedeng mag-speak yung mga indigenous through that. Pwede sila mag-make ng stands. Tapos, nakikita ko na may even out yung playing field na ang experts ay hindi lang yung mga nag-MA, PhD, kundi yung mga indigenous mismo kasi sila talaga yung expert doon. Kahit yung mga nag-MA, PhD, ang resource material nila ay yung mga indigenous mismo, pero yung mga indigenous, hindi tinatawag na indigenous expert sa sarili ng kultura. So medyo, dati ko pa siya pinoproblematize kasi pag pupunta ako sa dati na ang sabi ng ang refer sa akin ay indigenous expert. Hindi naman ako indigenous expert kasi hindi ako indigenous. Lahat ng alam ko ay galing sa isang elder o isang tao sa community. Medyo rin siya, medyo matagal ko rin pinroblematize kung saan yung role ko bilang Tagalog na saan ka lulugar sa espasyo ng yun, pakikisama sa indigenous or at the same time, hindi kinukuha yung espasyo sa kanila. So, sa ngayon yung stance ko ay in every opportunity na pwede silang nandun, ang trabaho ko lang ay ibigay sa kanila yung espasyo. So silang gagawa ng story nila, idea yun. Tapos, yung idea ay ma-empower ang lahat na ibahagi yung story nila according sa unique perspective nila kasi hindi talaga natin nakikita nila. As much as we try yun nga, nung may COVID ako, tapos may post-viral fatigue, wala talaga akong energy for everything else. Tapos bigla lang may biglang 2 hours of energy na kaya kong magsulat. Tapos, after nun, wala na ulit for anything else. Tapos dahil kung nagkaroon ako ng energy for this during a phase in my life na wala akong energy for anything else, kailangan ko lang siyang iwono. Imposter syndrome ng malalayong curatorial work. Muna ang hirap niyang sabihin. Curatorial. Pinaktas ko yun. Nang matagal. Yun. So, even yung term niya at yung language niya, nakakaano siya yun. Nung nandun ako sa stance, I think with Martha Graham, yung choreographer na, nasa Blessed and Rest, your job is to just be a channel. So, doon ko lang siya, na sa perspective na yun nagagawa. Otherwise, mag-analysis, paralysis ako ulit. May mentor rin kasi ako, holistic therapist, na indigenous, laki na sa US, pero Tamboto, Sinati Delson. So meron actually very aware na process kung paano papadaluin yung mga ancestors to us. So paano mo yung empty yung sarili mo na clear na makakapagpadaloy ka. So kapag nagpa-propose ako, yun yung hardest part kung paano ako nagiging clear na vessel. Kasi otherwise, dami nga halo. Ego, mga desires. So yun. So yun lang yung task. Tapos pag doon lang yung task, feeling ko, okay siyang space, hindi ako madidepress, hindi ako maubusan ng energy, hindi ako madidepress. Tapos yun lang yung concern ko, self-sustainability. May enough selfishness to prioritize my isa.
Ang isang gusto ko dun sa mentor ko naman na ginawa niya, parang sa context din ng pandemic yung ginawa niya. Parang paano mo gawin siya na online naman.
Sa theater. Struggle nga nila yun.
Yung pinaka-recent na ginawa kasi namin ng tawag, Sinakulong Masa. So sakto kasi nung nag-pandemic, approaching na rin, diba? Holy Week. Parang week-long play nga siya online na isang may Facebook.
Parang passion din, no?
Yes, ganun. Although kasi even before pandemic, ang idea naman niya ay more yung bahay-bahayan kasi na tinutukoy ni Vince na mas immersive. Ang pinagkaiba lang nito, naging online. Nag-adjust din sa situation. I think kasi yung poetry, almost malapit na mag-pandemic nung nagsimula ako ma-English. Talaga nung banda mo pa-pandemic, sakto kasi yun yung naging confusing na stage na part ng life ko na parang ganun din, asking ano yung purpose ng life, gusto kong gawin, dapat kong gawin, ganyan. Parang ano bang ginagawa ko na, parang nasa comfort zone pa ba ako, wala pa ako na-explore, ganyan. During that time kasi nakaka-encounter ko rin si Kuya Rem, so yung pinaka-mentor namin sa poetry class. So parang nag-workshop din siya doon sa Satya. Parang yung mga small workshop lang, parang natutuwa ako magsulat ng tula, pakonti-konti. And then eventually doon siya nag-start na, parang isip ko kung hindi nangyari yun, hindi ako mapapasali sa poetry class na yun, hindi ko makikilala itong mga tao to ngayon.
Ang napansin ko kasi, parang in times of crisis, mas nagiging reflective yung mga tao. Ako kasi depression survivor ako. And yun yung napansin ko when I had my depressive episode. Parang yun yung time na mas I was asking the bigger questions. Like, what's my purpose and gusto kong gawin? Tapos napansin ko sa mga close friends, family members, parang yun yung unang step nila. So they slowed down. They went through a depressive episode then because of the pandemic. Slowed down, they felt stuck. And then they start becoming more reflective. Came next is that once you start becoming reflective, you start becoming more creative din. Ay, nag-explore sila ng ibang mga art, like writing, poetry. Parang ako, because of the pandemic, I started writing poetry na, which is something that I was dipping myself into, pero mas in-embrace ko siya because of the pandemic. Because basically, I joined the poetry class because I needed people. Parang sobrang nagpalayo pa sa mga kaibigan, wala akong connection, wala akong kausap. So, tapos nagkaroon ng poetry class. So, parang I took advantage of that para magkaroon ng people around me, parang may sense of community. Pero at the same time, parang we were more ready. Siguro kung nag-start ng Poetry Fest before the pandemic, baka hindi ako kanta.
Okay.
Hindi ako reflective, hindi ako ready for it. I think what the pandemic did was, hinampas niya sa akin yung katotohanan na hindi magiging sustainable ang isang artistic path or isang creative path pag wala kang kausap or wala kang kasama. So, sobrang kong naramdaman yun because of the pandemic. Yeah, parang cross-pollinating. Nasa time ako ngayon na parang just being open to everything.
Pera COVID.
Pero COVID.